Attention. New message incoming. Message available. This INFOSTAMP contains information concerning the Cybermen. You must subscribe to this information channel to ensure that you receive future broadcasts. New message incoming. Message available. You will be upgraded. Please stand by. Begin INFOSTAMP. The best of Doctor Who. The Cybermen.
If the Daleks are Doctor Who's most popular monster, then the Cybermen are a very close second. Arguably, they are even more terrifying. On a deeply personal level, the notion of a human that has been augmented by technology is much more immediate to us, while the ethical arguments surrounding such developments are increasingly relevant to our fast-moving society. At the heart of this idea is a question. What happens when this surgery is taken to the extreme, and the product is less man than it is machine? The two key architects responsible for bringing the Cybermen to life were script editor Gerry Davis and his newly appointed scientific advisor, Kit Pedler. In particular, it was Pedler's concerns about spare part surgery that provided the inspiration for the creatures. The pair extrapolated these fears to form a storyline revolving around Earth's fictional twin planet Mondas and its inhabitants, whose obsession with upgrading themselves with artificial components had led to them becoming cold, emotionless soldiers. A metaphor for our own society and the lengths that we could conceivably go to in the future. The 10th Planet was an instant hit with viewers, and following its broadcast, further Cyberman stories were quickly commissioned. Despite first appearing in a First Doctor story, the Cybermen would become most strongly associated with Hartnell's successor, Patrick Troughton, featuring in all 3 of his seasons. To many, they are intrinsically linked with this era, the Second Doctor's most feared enemies. The Moonbase pitted Troughton's Doctor against the Cybermen for the very first time, once again employing the base under siege plot template that was common in this era. This convention was inverted in the Tomb of the Cybermen, in which the Cybermen are the ones contained in a remote outpost, the titular Tomb of the Cybermen, as opposed to those trying to break into it. Of all the Cybermen stories over the years, this is perhaps the one that is held in the highest regard by fans, thanks to its iconic imagery of the monsters breaking out of their tombs at the climax of Part 2. Having started with one Cyberman story, the show's 5th season ended up being closed by another, The Wheel in Space. Sadly, much of this adventure is missing from the BBC archives. 1969's The Invasion was a rather different affair, depicting an Earth invasion by the creatures, much like the Dalek invasion of Earth had done for the Daleks. This story is perhaps most famous for its iconic imagery of Cybermen stomping down the steps outside St. Paul's Cathedral, which has been pastiched in the years since in numerous promotional photo shoots. It was recreated in the TV series itself 45 years later in the 12th Doctor story, Dark Water. From this point onwards, Cyberman serials were few and far between. In fact, there were fewer Cyberman stories in the 70s and 80s put together than there had been in the 60s. Jon Pertwee's Third Doctor never got to face the Silver Giants, while each subsequent classic Doctor only ever fought them once, excluding cameo appearances. However, perhaps this was for the best. I tend to find myself that the later classic series Cyberman stories lack some of the charm of their earlier appearances, partially because they're not in black and white. In addition to this, the Cybermen are often presented as generic robots, which is a pity, while their camp voices and penchant for saying "excellent" do little to improve their credibility. Having said all of that, there's still lots to enjoy in these later stories. Revenge of the Cybermen explores the creature's allergy to gold and brings back the Cybermets first seen in the tomb of the Cybermen. Earthshock has a rather, excellent confrontation between the Fifth Doctor and the Cyber Leader about the importance of emotions, and also eating well-prepared meals. Meanwhile, Attack of the Cybermen presents some chilling imagery of the creatures in sewers and back on Telos, the site of their tombs, and Silver Nemesis features an exciting battle between the Cybermen and Ace. It's a little known fact that the Cybermen appeared in the revived series before the Daleks. Well, sort of. Okay, it was just a head rather than the whole thing, but it still counts, right? In fact, in the years since the show came back, a surprising number of Cyberman heads have cropped up, from the Revenge-style head in Van Statten's museum, to the Sentry Guard head which attacks Amy in the Pandorica Opens, to the Doctor's pet Handles in The Time of the Doctor, and finally the Invasion-style helmet thrown rather violently to the floor by Kate Stewart at the start of Death in Heaven. Eventually, the Cybermen returned in earnest in Rise of the Cybermen and The Age of Steel. To avoid confusing viewers with past continuity, showrunner Russell T Davies opted to create a whole new backstory for the monsters. Mirroring how the original Cybermen had hailed from Earth's twin planets, this new race originated on a parallel Earth at the hands of John Lumick and his company CYBUS Industries. Aspects of modern technology, such as the notion of mobile phone or computer upgrades, as well as Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, were incorporated into the narrative, bringing the Cybermen up to date for a 21st century audience. Many of the Cybermen stories of this era play on the dehumanising effects of digital technology. The Age of Steel introduced the emotional inhibitor into Cyberman lore, a key component that shields a converted human's brain from all emotions. In this story, deactivating the inhibitors defeats the Cybermen. A similar effect is achieved in The Next Doctor, when the converted Miss Hartigan realises the extent of what she has become, while in closing time, the day is saved by Craig's love for his son. This story also reintroduced the Cybemats to the show, last seen 36 years previously. Nightmare in Silver saw the Cybermen reinvented once more, a race that was more powerful than ever before, able to upgrade itself constantly as it encounters new threats. The downside of all this is that they were practically invincible, a problem that could only be resolved by blowing them all up. The Cybermen became something of a staple of the Capaldi era, featuring prominently in the 12th Doctor's first and final finales, in addition to a cameo in Series 9 finale Hellbent. By coincidence, on both occasions they served as foot soldiers to different incarnations of the Master. Firstly in the form of an army created by Missy as a birthday present for the Doctor in Dark Water and Death in Heaven, and on a much grander scale in World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls, when the Master's previous incarnation was present at one of the many genesises of the Cybermen. Both of these stories exploit the Cybermen's potential for body horror to gruesome effect. The Series 8 finale used ideas about death and the afterlife as its basis, presenting a method of cyberconversion which involves using cloud-based technology to temporarily upload human minds to a mainframe before depositing them back in their newly upgraded bodies. However, some viewers felt that the references to cremation were a little too close to home for a children's show. By contrast, Moffat's efforts in World Enough and Time were met with universal acclaim. The story is unforgiving in its depiction of the horrors of cyberconversion, putting audience identification figure Bill through the ringer as she is slowly subjected to the process. We're yet to see the Cybermen crop up in the Chibnall era, but I wager they'll be back sometime soon. Fittingly for a race so intent on repairing and rebuilding itself, the Cybermen have undergone a number of redesigns over the years. Behind the scenes limitations have often been reflected in what appears on screen, occasionally leading to moments of serendipity for costume designers. This is perhaps best exemplified by the development of the very first Cybermen, designed by Alexandra Tinnen, known as Sandra Reed at the time. In spite of the lack of time, money or resources available to her, Tinnen managed to put together a look that has gone down in history as iconic, providing the template for subsequent designs. Though some dismiss them as being a bit rubbish, there's another line of thought that says these are the most terrifying Cybermen there have ever been, with features such as the exposed hands and the cloth faces hinting at the creature's human, or Mondasian, origins. Ironically, the reasoning behind both of these choices was in fact practical. Tynion had intended to cover the hands with gloves, but forgot to source them for the filming date, and the cloth faces were utilised simply to hide the face of the actor, allowing different actors to play the same Cyberman. Then again, it's perhaps appropriate that these seemingly insignificant details should go on to achieve such horrific statuses, thus mirroring the development of the Cybermen themselves from innocent patients to emotionless soldiers. Renewal, repair and restoration are all common themes when it comes to the on- and off-screen development of the Cybermen. As early as their second appearance, it was decided that the costume needed to be reinterpreted, with the production team opting for something more uniform and more robotic, rather than the makeshift look of the first design. First seen in the moon base, variants of this outfit with modifications to the helmet, chest units and suit decoration appeared in subsequent 60s stories The Tomb of the Cybermen and The Wheel in Space. Tomb also introduced us to the Cyber Controller, with its simplified body, lack of handles and exposed brain. The monsters were given a more contemporary look for their final outing of the decade in the Earth-based adventure The Invasion. The most significant alteration was a larger helmet, the first to include the now iconic ribbed earmuffs. Once again, the Cybermen sported a slightly different look when they returned in Revenge of the Cybermen. Although elements of the helmet were retained, the rest of the suit was given a complete overhaul, with corrugated tubing featuring heavily. Furthermore, this story featured the very first Cyber leader, denoted by its black earmuffs, headpiece and handles. 7 years passed before the Cybermen appeared again, by which time another new decade had begun. Glitzy new costumes were created for their first 80s appearance in Earthshock, with helmets based on the familiar Invasion design. One new initiative was to make the piece of the helmet that covers the jaw transparent, so that the actor's jaw beneath, painted silver and covered in cling film, was visible. This was intended to hark back to the creature's roots, reminding the viewer that they were once organic beings. A new version of the Cyber Controller was depicted in the following Cyberman story, Attack of the Cybermen. Minor revisions were made to the 80s costumes for their appearance in Silver Nemesis, most notably a shinier chrome finish, as well as alterations to the boots and chest unit. When they returned to the show in 2006, nearly 20 years after their last appearance, the Cybermen were given a much needed upgrade. Taking influence from the bold geometric shapes of Art Deco, the CYBUS Cybermen were much bulkier and much more uniform than their predecessors. Variants of this design include the John Lumick version of the Cyber Controller, with its blue and white eyes and exposed brain, a CYBUS Cyber Leader introduced in Doomsday, a revised Cyber Leader, first seen in The Next Doctor, which features black more prominently on the face and earmuffs, as well as an exposed brain like the Cyber Controller, the same story's Cyber Shades, crude upgrades of cats and dogs, and Vast Cyber King, and the Cyber Sentry, assigned the job of guarding the Pandorica. It's no coincidence that in their later appearances, the CYBUS Cybermen looked a bit worse for wear, because the truth is, things really weren't too different behind the scenes. By the time of stories such as 2011's Closing Time, the costumes were over 5 years old and showing significant signs of wear and tear. The production team decided to use this to their advantage, hence why these Cybermen are presented as shadows of their former selves in this story and their subsequent appearances on the show. They also lack the C-shaped CYBUS Industries logo from their chests from Series 6 onwards, to suggest that they are from our universe rather than Pete's world. The Cybermen received their most recent redesign in the 50th anniversary year. Making its debut in Nightmare in Silver, this new look retained the same basic outline as previous designs, but in a much more sleek, streamlined overall package. Its stark simplicity pays homage to the original 60s Cybermen, the smooth surface and ghostly expression of the facepiece reminiscent of the cloth faces seen in the 10th Planet. A one-off, rather cool wooden Cyberman featured in the 11th Doctor's swan song, The Time of the Doctor, with the blue chest light swapped out for a yellow one. In a very welcome turn of events, the 10th Planet Cybermen, now dubbed the Mondasian Cybermen, returned for Peter Capaldi's last finale as the Doctor, at the actor's own request. New costumes were made with some very minor aesthetic tweaks to the originals in order to make them more suited to 21st century working conditions. On this occasion, the previously exposed hands were in fact covered with surgical gloves to make it easier to depict the Cyberman version of the Doctor's non-white companion, Bill Potts. So that does it for another episode of The Best of Doctor Who. But what do you love about the Cybermen? What's your favourite Cyberman design or your favourite Cyberman episode? Please do post your thoughts in the comment section below, I would love to hear them. I really hope you've enjoyed this special edition of The Best of Doctor Who. If you haven't seen the last one yet, which focuses on the Daleks, or even the original run from last year, which examines each Doctor's era in detail, please do check them out, and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon for some more new Doctor Who videos. Goodbye for now.